I have this old set of World Book encyclopedias on the bookshelf in my office at home. How many of you all have? Huh? Back in 1972, my parents bought them as a Christmas gift for our family. And all of these many years later, I, for some reason, held on to them. Now, the week before last, while I was trapped at home by the winter storm, I decided to do a little early spring cleaning. And my husband, who is not a clutterer at all, said to me, Bruce, you really should get rid of those encyclopedias. They are horribly out of date. Sentimentally, I said, oh, no, I want to keep them. And they're probably pretty useful still, right? Think about it. In the vast span of the history of human civilization, how much is really going to change in just a few decades? Well, then I opened up one of those 1972 encyclopedias and started reading. Wow. Maybe a lot can change in just a few decades. I first noticed how many of the names and the boundaries of the nations of the world were different today than they were in the 1970s, especially in places like Asia and Africa. But what was more stunning, more telling to me, was not the facts, but the way that these mid-20th century authors talked about history. For example, Native Americans were in the I volume for Indian. African Americans were often referred to as Negroes, and there was absolutely no mention that Thomas Jefferson had fathered children by his slaves. I learned from browsing through the pages of those encyclopedias that even if some of the facts of history don't change that much, the way that we talk about them and what we choose to emphasize or to leave out often does change quite a bit. And all this left me wondering how much of the narratives about the past that I was taught back when I was young have remained with me and continue to shape the way that I see the world, even if maybe I should know better. I have been reading a lot lately about what our children today will not be reading about in their current school history textbooks. A lot of this is thanks to decisions that have been made by a group called the Texas School Board. For years, powerful people in Texas with an ideological agenda have worked tirelessly to influence how history is taught to all of our children. Due to the size of the textbook market in Texas, what gets approved, what gets published there often affects what students learn in all 50 states. In recent years, many critics have pointed out that what passes for current American history books right now in schools now frequently downplays things like the realities and the brutality of American slavery. Some texts now totally omit references to the Ku Klux Klan and to Jim Crow laws. More than a few books currently being used teach that the Civil War was about states' rights and not about slavery. 10 years ago, proposals from the Texas School Board to include discussions of the weaknesses and strengths of the theory of evolution, proposals to remove a chapter about the Crusades, and editing out all mention of the gay rights movement. These were ultimately rejected. But lots of other interesting stuff has gotten into textbooks over the years particularly recently. Stuff like references to the huge influence Moses had on our founding fathers, tributes to the great accomplishments of Ronald Reagan, and talk of the success of McCarthyism in keeping us safe from communism. All that is now part of the curricula in many public schools in our country. Now, I get the political motivations of some people and the religious agenda of others when it comes to passing on information to our young people. And we know that people don't all agree about history. We all want to teach our children what we think is important and what supports our perspectives. But why would anyone want to remove references to slavery or to Jim Crow laws? Why would anyone approve a textbook that refers to people who were shipped across the Atlantic in chains as workers rather than slaves? One published textbook does that. Now, I get it. I really wish that I could forget about slavery. I would like to be able to pretend that segregation and lynchings and cross burnings were not a part of our history. I would like to make believe the Trail of Tears did not happen, that we never had internment camps for Japanese Americans, and that our nation never dropped bombs, atomic bombs, on civilian populations. I would like to forget about all of that and erase all of those truths from our history that are painful, all those things that don't make me feel good. But you know what? I cannot do that. We cannot do that. Have you ever had an experience that just felt like a major loss in your life? Received news from a doctor that you really did not want to hear. Got let go of a job that you loved. Discovered that the owner of the company which made your electric car has become a right-wing extremist. And in response, some very well-meaning, compassionate person says to you, "Oh, it'll all be all right." Now, for me, such platitudes do not seem to help much. In fact, while I appreciate the sentiment in which they are offered, hearing "it will all be all right" in such moments of crisis or loss can be like pouring salt onto a wound. We all do this to each other, even if we know better. When a friend or a family member is hurting, we cannot help but want it to all be better. We want to assure them that they can and will get through whatever hardship life has placed on them. We also want to reassure ourselves as well. So we sometimes say things and do things that are less than helpful. I think there are a fair amount of Americans today who simply no longer want to inflict the painful realities of our history onto their children's delicate minds, or onto their own delicate minds as well. When it comes to history they want to teach, it has always been all right. There are lots of our neighbors who just are tired of seeing other Americans constantly ragging on their country and bringing up all that nasty stuff from our past. They love America, and they worry that the next generation will not. They want to teach American exceptionalism by eliminating all mention of events, no matter how factual they are, that put our nation and its people in a bad light. I think there are many folks who just believe that if we would all just stop talking about racism, stop bringing up slavery, all the fuss, all the problems we have would just go away. But of course, in doing something like that, we would be erasing some people's history, silencing important voices and stories, and diminishing our collective potential to actually live together in respect and peace. In our reading this morning, Barry speaks of racism as a wound, an injury we have inflicted on one another through our history. He says racism is a painful reality that hurts not only those who are oppressed, but also the oppressor. Barry says that we cannot ever heal this wound in ourselves or in our society by ignoring it, or pretending it did not happen, or by telling ourselves the pain has passed and the wound is already healed. I hear him saying that we have to face it. We have to feel it. We have to remember it and teach it. And then get out that first aid kit and start working to try to fix it and mend it. Now, an interesting fact to note. The original text of that reading from Wendell Berry that he wrote in 1968 is slightly different than the way that I read it to you this morning. Back in 1968, what Berry actually wrote was, if the white man has inflicted the wound of racism upon the black man, the cost has been that he would receive the mirror image of that wound to himself. Berry used the patriarchal language of his time, referring to everyone as he. This is language that we no longer accept and have replaced with more gender-inclusive words in how we write about things today. I mention this because I had a hard time deciding if I should leave Berry's reading in its original form or if I should edit it and change it. Now, I know that pretending that such sexist norms were never a part of our culture and were at one point actually accepted as appropriate. By erasing that, by changing that language, I'm kind of ignoring all the great progress that we have made towards gender equality, making it invisible, saying it's maybe unimportant. Yet I chose to change that sexist language to words that I thought would be more hearable and more relatable to us today. Makes me wonder, maybe I should join the Texas School Board. Maybe I too suffer from a little of whatever it is that afflicts them, but only a little, I hope. I do not believe in American exceptionalism because I think that we, like every nation and every people, have accomplished great things and have also done horrible things. We, like all people, are capable of amazing good and tremendous evil. What I believe in and celebrate in America, and what I think makes our country great, is our ability as a nation to learn from our mistakes, to grow and to evolve, to let go of old ways of thinking. to evolve in our concepts of what we, the people, means. And to, if ever so gradually, break down those barriers that divide us. And to always keep moving towards a society which truly values all. I know that transformation has happened. I know it is always possible because I was taught in school about the realities of slavery and segregation. I learned about the Underground Railroad, about Cesar Chavez and Margaret Sanger and the Stonewall riots. And I know that it is essential for our future that every American knows about them as well. I have great hope that we will overcome the challenges that we face right now because we have made it through such times before. And we did not prevail over oppressions because it just magically turned out that way. The arc of the moral universe has bended towards justice because courageous people, folks like you and me, committed to making things change. The wounds of our past are actually what give me hope in our potential to resist and rise again today. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm pluralism, freedom, liberation as among our highest values. This means that we cannot ever pretend that the painful realities of our history never happened, or think for a minute that they are not still influencing all of our lives today. We are called to honor the truth and never let ourselves or anyone else forget it.